Those lines.
What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 138 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week we're talking UFC Vegas 75. Marvin Vettori taking on Jared Cannonier. Cool main event. Pretty cool card, top to bottom. I like it for betting. Lags, any thoughts on the card?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about it right before we went live here. I think it's a fun card, probably better than most of the fight nights they've been putting on recently. So a lot of fun fights, a lot of good matchups. I think a lot of good betting spots too. We'll talk about.
Yeah, agreed. Normally we would recap last week, but Lags has stuff to do tonight, so we're gonna skip that. We'll go through it next week.
Plus, we got a big slate today too. 14 fights.
Yeah, 14
One of
fights
the
late
biggest
here as
recently.
well. So, and I would say, like I just said to you before we hopped on, I think this is one of the best cards for a fight night we've had in like 12 months. I mean, it's been dicey out there in the streets recently. But yeah, I mean, with that, we'll hop right into it. A lot of cards to get to it. First fight of the night, we got Zach Paulga taking on Modestas Bukauskas. Bukauskas all the way up to minus 200 right now. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, first bet of the night actually on the first fight of the night, and I think a lot of people will just see this fight as like it's a sloppy fight. Want nothing to do with it. It's a low volume fight. But to me, it's like, where does Modestas like cover minus 200 against a warm body? Really, like he's not high volume, doesn't have much power, doesn't really have much grappling upside. His cardio's okay, really. I think Paulga can mix in the clinch here. I think he can get it to the clinch pretty easily. I like the jab. I think it's striking. Like I think the striking is pretty competitive here, all in all. So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't bet it, and I'm very on the fence just because I really, really don't like betting on guys taking steps up in competition. It never seems to work out with me, especially when they're at a huge experience disadvantage that Nick is at in this fight. But I do agree with you. I mean, when has Modestas Bukauskas, Zach, sorry. When has Nick, I don't know why I thought that. When has Modestas Bukauskas covered minus 200 against anybody in Cage Warriors or the UFC,
Right.
to be quite frank? Statistically, Paulga's put up better numbers, albeit against far worse competition again. So, yeah, I don't know if I'll play it or not, but I do feel like, 67% for Bukauskas implies he's got grappling upside, which I don't see, or just dominates the striking. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I don't really get it. I would pick Bukauskas. It's funny because when I eyeballed this card, I was thinking we'd probably get Bukauskas dog, and I was like, okay, I think I'll probably bet Modestas in this fight. Did not expect minus 200. But yeah, I mean, I'll pick Bukauskas. Probably won't bet it. Moving on, Ronnie Lawrence taking on Daniel Argetta. I bet Lawrence big at like minus 150. Honestly, I think there's still a fair amount of meat on the bone here. I really don't rate Argetta as a UFC caliber fighter. I know he comes from a wrestling background, but the truth is, I think his grappling is fairly sloppy. You saw him look fairly helpless grappling against Damon Jackson. Yeah, obviously, that was up at 145 in short notice. And Jackson, obviously, a very good grappler himself. But at the same time, Damon Jackson, it's not even really a traditional or his style of wrestling in the cage is not very traditional. It's more cage wrestling than anything else. And I just haven't really liked what I've seen from Argetta's hips in that fight. I didn't really like what I saw against Diego Silva regionally. I didn't like what I saw against Ricky Turcios on Tough, who was getting takedowns fairly easily and getting the dominant positions. And now he's taking on Ronnie, and it's like, well, if he can't, is he going to out wrestle Ronnie? I'd be really surprised. I've seen takes along that lines because they're both from wrestling, where he's from more of a wrestling background than Ronnie. But I really just don't think he's a very good MMA grappler. I think Ronnie is. I think there's a big cardio gap here on the Lawrence end, and I actually think Ronnie's a much better striker. I mean, Argetta is literally a zombie coming forward. He has no defense on the feet. I don't think he's even technically that sound offensively. I think Ronnie should have this covered everywhere. Should be able to get him down easily, even if he gets taken down. I feel as if there's maybe some recency bias off the Kakramanov fight because of how badly he got mauled. But if you rewatch that fight, he was getting back up pretty consistently early in the fight and, reversing him in the over-under position. And I don't think Argetta is bringing even like 40% of what Kakramanov was bringing in terms of physicality, cardio, just athleticism. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of think Ronnie should be up in the minus 250 range here. What do you think?
I think everybody brings up that Damon Jackson fight as like Argetta looked decent there. Oh, it was decent showing by him. But he got out-grappled, soundly out-grappled for that fight. So I don't really think it's like a feather in his cap, you know. I get it was on short notice, but for me, the Ricky Tercios fight was like the biggest like red flag here. It's like the guy's punching bag standing, is getting out grappled by Ricky. The cardio looks woeful in the third round. I think this is Lawrence all day. I just missed the number personally, so nothing really bad.
Pepe said KO 2-3, and I don't hate that. I honestly kind of think Lawrence's finishing ability is probably a tad underrated because he's gotten so many like volume takedown type deals. But Argetta gives up really bad positions. Kind of to your point, Jackson got to his back really quite easily once he got him down in that
and so
fight.
did Aguirre in his last fight.
Yeah, exactly. And that guy, I mean, belongs nowhere near the UFC. So
No.
I do think Ronnie's going to get two dominant positions in this fight. But yeah, I like Ronnie. Moving on, Teresa Blada taking on Gabriela Fernandez. I feel kind of sick to my stomach doing it, but like I poked Fernandez up over plus 200. I don't know that I'd be dying to play her plus 185. I think it's trending closer to right here. Obviously, I think everybody's going to more or less have the same take here that Fernandez isn't very good on the ground. Bleda heavy on top. She should maul her. I kind of think it's a bit of a market reaction and oversimplification, though, with this fight. You know, Fernandez was a favorite against Jasmine Jasdavicius, like going into her last fight. I bet Jasmine in that fight because I felt like she could get taken down and wasn't great off her back. But at the same time, you know, Jasmine, we just saw her this weekend. I mean, she's a fairly tested woman. She's fought a lot of high-quality fighters. She's got a great wrestling game. She is great cardio and just can continue to push a pace on you. And even in that fight, you know, Fernandez did defend takedowns fairly well early in the fight and was lighting her up on the feet. She just couldn't do much once Jasmine got on top. And don't get me wrong, like Bleda gets on top of her here. It could get ugly potentially. But two things. One, I feel like Bleda is like ripe for sticking her head into a submission. I really don't think she's got great jiu-jitsu. And the other thing is, I don't think Bleda is like a very good wrestler. She's more just like a physical force than anything else. And I saw like a lot of takes like talking about how good Natalia Silva's defensive wrestling was in that fight. And it was solid. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like putting it down. But also, it was really just Bleda trying to wrench her down from a body lock like that entire time. And I don't think that's a position she's going to have a very easy time pulling Fernandez down from. Fernandez is good in the clinch. She's fairly strong herself. On the feet, she is going to light Bleda up. And I guess, you know, ordinarily that wouldn't be enough just given that a takedown could be around. But, I mean, Bleda's gas tank is really quite poor here. And if she starts to wear down after a round, if takedowns don't come easy, I kind of think she's going to get lit up. And I am not confident she'll be able to get takedowns in the second and third round in the same manner that Jasmine did. So again, I do understand Bleda being a moderate favorite just because of the knowns in this fight. But I just think the market's overreacting far too much to Fernandez losing a fight to someone who's proving to be a fairly decent and at least mid-tier fighter in this division. What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, with at least the market overcorrection. Like looking at Blada's side too, like she was like I was just looking at the line on Best Fight. She closed about plus 140, plus 150 to Silva, and now she's like, you know, she was minus 300, I should say. So that seems a bit steep, but like I can't really disagree with her having a large grappling edge here. I think she does have a minus 300 to 400 grappling path here. But yeah, the cardio is just really not great sign from her. So
yeah, agreed.
Not much to add. Yeah.
Moving on, we got Zalgas Zumagulov taking on Felipe Bunese. Zalgas minus 175. Not something you really expect to see in the UFC. Lags, any hot takes here?
No, you usually don't see Zalgas at minus 175, but I mean, I think largely the line's about right. Like, I think Bunese brings decent pressure, but like he's pretty low volume, not a great wrestler. More so like when he's on his back, he's fine with playing guard. I think Zalgas can land takedowns. I think on the feet he can outwork him too. It's just Zalgas's margins are never, you know, wide enough to want to lay minus 175 on him. But I think, you know, like minus 150-ish, I think it's broadly right.
Yeah, honestly, had I taped it earlier, I might have even laid the minus 150 on Zalgas. Like, I'm not betting it where it is now, but I don't think Bunese is bad by any means. He obviously fought quite a good strength of competition regionally, among the best you'll see for someone making a debut in the UFC. And he fared okay against it. But Bunese to me is someone who's going to be really dangerous against opponents who have like major deficiencies in their game, i.e. they're fragile or they have poor jiu-jitsu, just because Bunese tends to be just very, very aggressive on the feet and obviously very aggressive on bottom. But I think defensively, he's very, very poor, both standing and, he can get put on bottom very easily. And if you know how to ride him out, he's not presenting, you can pretty much ride him out on top if you can defend submissions. And I look at this fight, and that's kind of more or less what I think of it. I don't feel like he's super, super likely to hurt Zalgas on the feet. I feel like Zalgas is a better striker than he is. And Zalgas does wrestle from time to time, and I kind of think he can grind him out and wrestle here. I think the biggest concern is Zalgas' gas tank, but I don't know, man. I feel like Zalgas falls in line with like a lot of the guys who have beaten Bunese in his career. But yeah, I mean, look, Zalgas' margins are so fucking thin. You could never really make him a big favorite in any fight. But yeah, I don't know. I'm passing here. I do think some of the early Zalgas numbers were decent personally, though. Moving on, Carlos Hernandez, Denise Bondar. This line flipped. We got Bondar minus 129, Hernandez plus 109. I had taken some Bondar early, but I flipped out of it just because, man, I don't know. It's very weird. Like on paper, there's a couple things about the fight that I theoretically like from Bondar. Obviously, he comes from the more like credentialed wrestling background of the two. I think from a market perspective, Bondar going from like minus 350 in his debut, getting hurt a minute in to being, pick him here with Carlos Hernandez doesn't make terribly much sense. And I also hate the fact that Carlos Hernandez just really is not very threatening. He's an okay submission grappler, but not very special. Yeah.
I feel like he's just mid everywhere,
I don't think he's bad. Honestly, he's kind of like Zalgas, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
He doesn't have bad tools, but he doesn't hit hard. His jiu-jitsu is okay, but it's not great. He can get wrestled. And so a guy who's not likely to finish, who can give up takedowns, it's very hard to back at flyweight against a wrestler. And that was kind of my initial thinking. But I mean, the more you look into it, Bondar has really he's fought fucking nobody, man. Like even the guys who had like, allegedly, from what I heard, he apparently beat Steve Erceg a couple years ago, which in retrospect seems good. It's not on his Tapology, but apparently that fight happened. I couldn't find it. But I haven't even loved the way he looked regionally. And so like I look at it, I feel on the feet, Hernandez has a pretty wide edge. So the entire question here is, can Bondar get him down and control him? And I'm not really sure. Perez obviously struggled to control Hernandez for parts of that fight. Obviously, Nascimento submitted him last fight, but Nascimento is a much more dangerous grappler than Bondar is, in my opinion. And so I feel like there are more knowns on the Hernandez side, even though I don't really like those knowns, but like I know what I'm getting.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Generally, whereas I don't really know what I'm getting from Bondar at all because of the strength of competition. So I'm okay with pass. I understand the line being where it is, and I do think just strictly market-wise, it's probably an overcorrection, but I'm not interested in it. What do you think?
I think the line is fine-ish, not just because of those takedowns, because of the grappling upside of Bondar. But yeah, to your point, his strength potential has been so low at the same time though, Carlos Fernandez I think isn't much. Like he's barely UFC caliber in my opinion. There's not one facet of his game where it can blow you away or it can dominate the fight. So
Pepe pointed out it was his last AMI fight. But what's weird is, so like I noticed that, but that fight was in 2019 and Bondar's been a pro since like 2014. So kind of odd. I'm not really sure what's going on there. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's an easy fight to stay away from. Moving on, I'll throw it to you here, though. We got Kyung-Ho Kang taking on Christian Quinones. What are your thoughts?
So I did bet Kyung-Ho Kang here as well at plus 140. To me, I think on the feet, it's pretty competitive, striking-wise, volume-wise. And I think he can – if we're looking at this hindsight, who's going to be the guy landing 2 to 3 takedowns? I think it's Kyung-Ho Kang. So I think it should be much closer to like a pick'em.
Yeah, it's interesting because before I taped the fight, I said to a couple people, I'm betting Kang big here. This is an obvious one. Quinones beat Taha. He's coming off like a pretty poor strength of schedule. But then, I taped it, and I did bet Kyung-Ho Kang in this fight, but I bet him small. I actually think Quinones is probably a lot better than I gave him credit for prior to the Taha fight. Like on the feet, I think Kang can compete, but I really like Quinones' volume. His boxing's pretty sharp, and his cardio looks pretty good. So while I think Kang can compete there, I kind of think Quinones has just a ton of volume upside. Like I'd favor him fairly clear on the feet. The question really comes down to what do you think of the grappling here? And you mentioned, and I'm with you, I think if anybody's going to land 2-3 takedowns, get 5 to 8 minutes of control, it's Kang for sure. Kang's a very good wrestler. He's a strong MMA grappler overall. My big concern is just his last fight. It's funny because as good as he looked, and everybody thinks he looked against Batgirl, and he did look good there, he didn't really try to grapple at all, which, given the dynamic, given what we just saw from Batgirl, was kind of a very bizarre approach, to be quite honest. And so I'm very torn because I feel if he could look in retrospect favorite here if he comes out and grapples the way he has most of his career. But if he comes out in the way he did against Batgirl, I really think Quinones has a significant edge volume wise. Evan mentioned Kang had great volume against Dana, and he did land many strikes, but he also landed at a very, very, very high clip. He didn't throw nearly as many as Dana did, and that's kind of my concern. I feel like Quinones is going to put up just much, much bigger numbers in terms of strikes attempted, and I think he's a bit more accurate than Dana is. But we'll see. I have one unit on Kang, plus 150. We'll see what happens. I think Quinones is pretty good, though. I would not be surprised if he takes care of business here. Moving on, Jimmy Flick, Alessandro Costa. Costa, big fucking favorite here. Minus 245, plus 210. Jimmy Flick, the comeback. Man, it really, every time Jimmy Flick fights, I get angrier and angrier about losing that bet on Cody Durden against him. I had Durden big at like plus 160. And like, what is that line if they fight tomorrow? Durden minus 500? Like, literally?
I know. We talk about all these hindsight lines all the time. The one I always love you bringing up is Fluffy Holland.
Oh, that's another one.
Good. I was on it too. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel Costa should win. You know, it's one of those things where if he stuffs the takedowns, Jimmy Flick has got nothing on the feet. And I shouldn't even say my suspicion. Jimmy Flick very clearly doesn't like getting hit and tends to want out when things tend to go sideways on him. And Costa did stuff takedowns against Albazi. So, you know, I think there's some merit to the line. At the same time, you know, Jimmy Flick's 16-6. It's not like the guy's gotten here only grappling bums who can't grapple. You know, he fought decent guys regionally. I mean, he took down Nate Smith, who was like an All-American high school wrestler. CJ Hamilton, like he actually fought like a pretty reasonable, you know, regional schedule. And so I'm a little hesitant, even though I don't personally like Jimmy Flick's wrestling, and I feel Costa should be able to keep this upright. I'm a little hesitant to say that with any certainty because, yes, if Costa keeps it upright, he's going to look minus 1,000. But it could very easily be a fight where Flick's able to kind of just maneuver him to the mat and then absolutely goes to Pound Town here. You know, he did get Charles Johnson down once, but Charles Johnson is a very, very strong anti-grappler with an elite get-up game. We don't really know much about Costa's get-up game, and even his takedown defense, you know, you didn't really see Amir look... Actually, I should say this. In that fight, he got held down for a round, but we didn't really see Amir try to push the takedowns that hard. He attempted 4, but they were mostly just single shots, and he was okay striking. I don't know, man. I'm not betting Jimmy Flick, to be clear here, because I think the upside on the Costa side is quite high. But I couldn't get behind a Costa bet here. And thank you, Evan. I appreciate it very much. Lags, what do you think?
I will say, to add to the one part with him getting held down in that fight, he did get knocked down at the one point and was held down for the majority of the round. So, I think Costa should be fine here. Like Flick, as you touched on, the wrestling is not good. His cardio is no good. I think this guy's got maybe 5 minutes, if that, of gas. His striking is no good. It's wooden. He's hittable. I'm not trying to call him a quitter, but he wants out.
He's kind of a quitter.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, yeah. We hate doing it on the pod, but it is what it is. And yeah, I think Costa should finish him. Honestly, I think it should be pretty early. Shouldn't have much issue, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, agree completely. Moving on, intriguing fight here. We got Raoni Barcelos taking on Miles Johns. Barcelos minus 211. Comeback on Johns plus 181. Lags, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you're going to hear it all week this week, and I think it makes sense. I think Howney dominates Miles pretty much everywhere this fight goes, and it's a question of where his durability is at because Howney on the feet, much more volume than Miles Johns, and I just think he outworks him really. I mean, Miles Johns is a guy who's just low volume, relies on the power, and he's a guy who doesn't have much power, in my opinion. Cardio is not good from him either. He's not a guy who's looking to wrestle either, so I think this is Howney all day, really.
I don't know. I'm not betting Miles Johns, to be clear. Again, but I feel I don't like. I mean, it was only he got KO'd in January, like pretty bad by Umar. He's only had 5 months, which it's not that short a turnaround, but at the same time, at 35 years old or 36 years old, however Raoni is, it is a somewhat fast turnaround. In the same vein with the age thing with Raoni. He's 36 at 135 pounds. Like, guys, athleticism, when it tends to go pretty quickly. You know, I'd point out, you know, he dominated Trevin Jones 2 fights ago. I think I bet him. I know that. But, like, Trevin Jones, it's really just don't get clipped by the left hand and you should be fine against Trevin Jones. He looked really old against Victor Henry 2 fights ago in a fight that hasn't aged particularly well, in my opinion. If you watch, you know, how Henry handled 40-year-old Rafa Assunção. I don't know. I feel like Raoni, I agree with everything you said. He's the better fighter. He's probably even the better wrestler. But I do think he's pretty clearly declining. And he's coming off a big KO. And he's taking on Johns, who is 29, hits pretty hard, can wrestle himself. Like, yes, he's gassy and fragile. And I feel like once the snowball gets rolling on Johns, like if you start getting volume off, things tend to go downhill for him quick. But I just feel like there's more upside of Johns improving here randomly from fight to fight. More upside of Raoni falling off a cliff. Raoni coming off a KO against a decent hitter for bantamweight. Like, his durability could be going. I don't know. I understand, like, the logic conceptually of why people would want to bet Raoni in the spot. But I feel like the floor, like John's floor, we know what it is. John's floor is he kind of either gasses out or just gets melted in the face of superior volume. But what is Raoni's floor? Raoni's floor could be he's just completely washed. You know, we don't really know. So I'm not going to play Miles Johns because I agree with you. Raoni has a minus 200 skill set here for sure. But I think there's enough questions about the Barcelos side that I don't really want to get involved. Moving on, we got Muslim Salikov, Nicholas Dalby kicking off the main card. Salikov minus 190, comeback on Dalby plus 165. Similar to the last fight, and I would say this about both sides here. I would honestly have a fairly strong Salikov lean if you told me we were 100% getting like the most recent versions of both of these guys. But they're both 39 years old. Salikov to me seems like he's getting older and more rickety with each fight that goes by. I guess in terms of breakdown, like I've seen Dalby busyness angles and I just don't really buy into it because who's gotten real volume off against Salikov? I mean, Zaleski couldn't. Leach kind of did after he hurt him, but prior to that, Salikov was getting a fairly low volume fight. You know, the truth of the matter is, I think sometimes the market looks at like volume numbers and they're like, oh, this guy's low volume, and they don't consider counter strikers with big power tend to suppress volume at an enormous clip. Like Tyron Woodley didn't accidentally become the champion. Yes, he was a horrendous minute winner, but he was fast and he hit really hard and was sharp on the counter. So nobody wanted to throw back at him. You know, that happens. We see that time and again with these counter strikers who hit hard. And it's no different from Salikov. Yeah, Salikov's low volume. His opponents out-attempt him. He outlands his opponents 1.5 to 1 at distance, though. All of his opponents who have been high volume prior to him don't attempt a lot of strikes. So I'm not really buying that, you know, Nick Dalby is going to bite the mouthpiece and enter the fire. Because the last time we saw Dalby fight a really imposing striker was Daniel Rodriguez. And Dalby landed 50 significant strikes that fight. He landed 45 against Tim Means. I just can't see. I feel like the margins are going to be very thin either side on volume in this fight. That's I guess what I'm coming to. And so with that being the case, I just think the finishing equity on the Salikov side is so much higher here. He's the much bigger hitter. Dalby doesn't even have a knockdown in the UFC, which feels kind of relevant. And I just don't think there's a lot of grappling equity on either side. Salikov, yeah, he can get mauled by really good grapplers, but I don't really think Dalby's that. I'd be surprised if he got extended top time. So yeah, I think the line is right. But again, with both of them at 39, how could you really take a strong stance here? Everybody was jumping on board to bet Warlley Alves a fight ago against Nick Dalby because Dalby was shot. Can you really back that guy? Yeah, everybody was betting Andre Fiallo against Salikov because Salikov was shot. The market that thought both these guys were shot a fight ago. I'm not really trying to get involved. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I think Dalby sucks, man. I don't think. I think
he's an elite weasel.
Really, he's getting a lot. He gets a lot of flack or not a lot of flack. He gets a lot of credit from that D-Rod fight. In these next couple fights, really, to me, I don't know. I don't think Dalby presents much to Salikov at all. I think that if anything, we're looking at a 60-40 strikes where Salikov is hitting him harder with those strikes anyway. So I think Salikov handles him, and like you said, higher finishing upside as well.
Moving on. Arguably the fight of the night. Is it maybe the MMA Twitter main event? I'm not really sure. But we got Nicholas Moda. Is it? What do you think?
I think Sabatini Almeida probably.
We'll get to that. But we got Nicholas Moda taking on Manuel Torres. Torres minus 180. Comeback on Moda plus 155. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Torres for me, just to play the unders angle for me. Torres falls in that category of guys like an Uros Medic or even last weekend, not obviously the same caliber, but Charles Oliveira. He's a guy win or lose. He's going to go into the fire. It's going to be a chaotic fight, and we're going to get unders. I like Torres. Obviously, the guy defensively, he's not that great. Cardio is still very unproven, but the guy's going to come after you early, and I think Moda just has durability flaws that I think he could put him out early. But obviously, if it gets extended, there's definitely questions for sure. But I like the under 2.5 parlayed up.
Yeah, I love Moda here. I have 3 units on him, and I got a horrible line. I got plus 145, and now it's plus 155. But those have been working out lately.
Exactly.
We had Charles last week. Yeah.
I was going to say, we were literally talking about that last week with Charles. You said you got reverse rate. I'm like, John, those were working out for you. Exactly. Just planned.
I guess I'm not even – I think there are aspects of Torres' game that are cool. Who doesn't like the hyper aggressive type guys who come in there and bang and actually have real power in their hands and can put guys out? But beyond that, I don't think the guy has much of a game. His grappling is terrible. Not that I expect Moda to come out and grapple him, but he's no danger to take Moda down is my point. Right. His defense is non-existent. You go watch the fight with Camacho, and Camacho, every time he let his hands go, was landing flush right on the chin. And other than that, it's he has the Camacho fight and the Colton England fight. The England fight, he finishes him in the first round, but he pokes him in the eye, and England basically shelled up. He didn't hurt him with his hands. Camacho, this dude looks like he's taking deep breaths and starting to slow down 3 minutes into the fight, but then he hits Camacho with a mid-strength jab, and Camacho is stunned. The truth is, Frank Camacho in 2022 just gone. No durability anymore, no gas, no speed, no defense. Guy was just a corpse. And I didn't think Torres looked particularly great in that fight. In terms of his regional opponents, he's fought nobody regionally. Literally nothing but bums. And now he's fighting Moda, and I don't disagree with you. I do think Moda's he clearly can be hurt. There's no question about that. He's been KO'd 3 times. Obviously, that is the big concern in this matchup. But at the same time, Moda's a really sharp counterboxer, man. And sticking in a hyper-aggressive guy with no defense is pretty much exactly what you want to hand a counterboxer like Moda. I know he gets some flack for the Miller fight, but I kind of feel like the market has a bad memory of that fight. He wobbles Miller bad in the first round. And if you rewatch it, just about every time Jim blitzes him in round 1, he's getting caught hard on the counter. Literally almost every time until he realized about 3 minutes into the round that Moda wasn't going to check kicks. And that's really just swung the fight, obviously.
Yeah.
But Moda, I don't really think he's poor defensively. He does a good job staying at the edge of his opponent's range. He does a good job defensively in the pocket when he's exchanging. Again, he could get clipped. We've seen it happen with him multiple times in his career. He's been knocked out. But how high are you putting that percentage? I think Torres is very gassy. I feel like his chance to land a knockout probably goes over a cliff after about 3 minutes in this fight. And even while they're fresh, I don't favor Torres in exchanges at all. Like, my biggest fear is that Torres goes to overwhelm him, and maybe before Moda gets his reads down, he kind of freaks out and shells up. Like, I think that could happen. But I honestly think once he's making reads in the pocket on Torres, he is going to absolutely pick him apart pretty easily. Like I said, Torres very easy to hit. Moda very sharp on the counter. I think Moda's style is absolute poison for Torres. And while Torres is a big hitter, Moda is a huge hitter himself. I've seen people talk about Torres' durability. The guy hasn't gotten cracked by anybody that's like a real hitter yet. I don't know. I feel like this is like the perfect set, not a set up fight for Moda, but I feel like it's the perfect like fight for a dog fight. Like what is your best case with Torres? That he comes out and wins a dick swinging contest. That is really your optimal, right? Am I wrong about that? I feel like that is your absolute optimal case for Torres as he comes out, wins a cock measuring contest, puts Moda down early in this fight. Beyond that, what's your best case for Moda? Well, your best case for Moda is he could knock Torres out early, just like Torres could knock him out. He could also just pick him apart for 15 minutes. If anybody actually had any wrestling upside, it would probably be Moda, but he's not going to go for it. But we also have Moda just looking minus 250 hindsight upside for him, in my opinion. Whereas I just don't think Torres' style inherently, I would say it's not even at his current line at like minus 180. This isn't like Conor McGregor who's out there feinting guys into counters. He's just coming forward, chin in the air, trying to take you out. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't see how this line is even possibly right. I feel like at absolute worst, you're talking about a pick'em type line. And at best, Moda could look like a huge favorite here. So yeah, I've got 3 units on Moda. Feel fairly strongly about it. Moving on though, another banger fight here, and I have another big position here. I bet Pat Sabatini at minus 175, pretty big. I still think there's some small amount of meat on the bone potentially at minus 207, but I really think Pat is going to grind this guy out badly. I understand, I guess, the Almeida takes just because Pat does look fragile. Obviously, he's been hurt a number of times in his career. And so Almeida hurting him wouldn't really be something that shocked me. But at the same time, Almeida kind of needs you to get in the pocket with him to have success. And we know Pat's not going to get in the pocket with him. And I kind of think Almeida is very, very easy to get against the fence. And like we saw in the Lutz fight, Pat's cage wrestling is really excellent. And I feel Lutz's background was a lot more conducive to keeping fights standing against someone like Pat than Almeida's game. And Lutz couldn't keep that fight standing at all. He got mauled. And so I look at this fight, and I'm like, man, well, I mean, Pat's out-grappled a bunch of good grapplers, like badly out-grappled him. What has Almeida done? He KO'd Mike Trezano in a fight where he was a medium-sized underdog. Like, okay. You go back 4 years ago, he fights this guy, Cuochio, who's basically LFA prelim material, who is literally ragdolling him on the mat for long portions of that fight. Again, 4 years ago, but Almeida's 32. He's not a 25-year-old prospect. He's got 15 fights. He's 32 years old. He's at a bad gym. And if I hadn't seen him grapple again since then, I might give more credence to the idea he's gotten better. But we saw him get taken down by Daniel Zellhuber, and Zellhuber was passing his guard very, very easily down there, which makes me think Pat's going to have virtually zero issue holding him down if he gets on top and getting the dominant positions in this fight. I just think the real question is how high do you price a KO early in this fight for Almeida? I don't think you can price it that high. I mean, Pat's been KO'd once, other than an arm injury he suffered in one fight, but he's only been really KO'd once in his career. Obviously, it was in his last fight, but you look at his time in the UFC, he spent 77% of his time in a control position. Do I expect Almeida to outperform guys like Lutz or Laramie who come from grappling backgrounds? Or Connolly, who also comes from a grappling background? No, I don't. And so if you were to say he's going to spend 67%, let's just say he does outperform those guys. So he's going to spend 10 minutes in a control position in a 15-minute fight. Is he 20%, 25% to KO Sabatini in 5 minutes on the feet? That seems, unless you're telling me he's one of the biggest hitters ever at lightweight, that just feels very extreme to me. I think Pat probably plays it smart. He can get knocked out here for sure. Don't get me wrong. Would it be shocking? No. I mean, that's how Almeida's going to win this fight. But I think Pat's going to get him down here at a pretty consistent rate. And I think once he gets him down, he absolutely tears through him on the mat. I even think Pat's sub around like plus 200 range isn't really a crazy look personally. What do you think, Legs?
Just to piggyback on that last point there, I feel like it is narrow enough to just say it is that 5 minutes for that window for Almeida, just because I feel like the grappling, once it does ensue, it's going to snowball pretty fast.
And I mean, his gas tank is
right. No, that's what I was just going to say too. The wrestling and the cardio gaps for Pat here are huge, similar to how I feel like the Ronnie fight and this fight are fairly comparable in that aspect, with the wrestling and the cardio. So yeah, I mean, I think line's probably right. Again, similar to the Ronnie fight. Again, missed the line at -170.
Fair enough. Moving on. Christian Leroy Duncan taking on Armen Petrosian. What do you think?
Fun fight. I don't really have a strong take here just because I don't really know the ceiling of Duncan, really. What I would say. I mean, to be honest with you, there's not a ton of guys who are out there looking to just strike with him, and I think by far Petrosian's the best striker he's fought.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's going to be a good fight. I just more so just sitting back watching.
Yeah, I like Petrosian quite a bit here.
Okay.
I have 2 units on him.
The dog hunter.
The thing is, like, I faded Duncan in his last fight. And obviously, I mean, you can't really take anything from that. You know, Toto tore his ACL 2 minutes into the fight. Who cares? But I just don't really like Duncan's game in general. Don't get me wrong. He's obviously very fast. He hits very hard. Like, he's a dynamic striker. Like, there's no question about that. And I think he'll get a number of KOs in the UFC, to be honest, because he is a hard hitter. But at the same time, you know, my biggest takeaway taping him both before this fight and the Todorovic fight were he's a very low volume striker, for one. He's very, very easy to get strikes off on without throwing them back in return. Like, I don't even think he's particularly interesting as a counter striker. And on the other side, with Armen Petrosian, you have a guy who is a very, very, very high volume striker and who actually comes from a kickboxing background himself. And so on the feet, my view is I think Petrosian, as long as he doesn't get knocked out, owns this fight standing personally. Like, I have some concerns about the reach. Like, Duncan does have an 8-inch reach advantage, but everybody Petrosian's fought has had a big reach advantage against him, and he's out-volumed all of them fairly healthily. And similarly short or similar fighters in reach to Petrosian have gone out there and out-volumed Duncan on the feet. So, like, my real question is, does Duncan get to put a singlet on here and come out and wrestle? Because I do think Petrosian is a terrible defensive wrestler. I think objectively anybody can say that.
Right.
But no one's really held him down outside of Kaio, who's like a legit jiu-jitsu player. You know, pretty much a bunch of the guys he fought pre-UFC and in the UFC on Contenders, Kovalev, were better grapplers than Christian Duncan is. Like, for sure. You know, Christian Duncan was getting mauled by Will Curry, who until a fight ago, I think people actually thought was a good grappler, but is not. I mean, he's very, very average grappler, just aggressive. He does grapple from time to time. And, like, would I be surprised if he got 3 or 4 takedowns? No, not really. But that's also never really been his MO in MMA, is to go aggressively after takedowns. Like, is a guy with as much explosion going to come out here, get 3, 4, 5 takedowns, and his cardio is going to hold up? I think that's a very, very open question, you know, and I feel like I can't say I feel like the answer is no. I think it's hard to really come to any kind of firm conclusion about that, but we haven't seen him do it. And so my base case is it's probably going to be standing. I feel like Duncan's KO equity here is not even anywhere near as high as the market thinks it is. Like, give me the more experienced guy who's outperformed much better competition on the feet than Christian Duncan, who also happens to be the busier fighter as a dog. Like, I think Petrosian should be -125, -150 here. I just really don't like Christian Duncan's game, like, whatsoever.
What are your thoughts on the over?
What's the price?
I think it was like about pick'em, maybe -105 to the over last time I looked.
I kind of lean that way. I mean, Petrosian.
Never mind. I lied.
What is it?
It's -150.
Yeah, that's less good. You know what I saw that was pretty interesting, though? Like, Petrosian by KO is a pretty fucking big price. It's like plus 475, like, in a kickboxing match. I know Petrosian hasn't finished anybody in the UFC yet.
6-1.
6-1?
Yeah, it's on Bet Online, 6-1.
KO for Petrosian?
Yeah.
That's
no, sorry, that's Betway. Sorry, because I'm on Best Fight Odds. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so he
still
hurt Rodriguez. Like, he obviously had Dobson in a bit of trouble. I feel like he had 5 KOs prior to getting into the UFC. Like, I feel like a plus 500 for what's likely, in my opinion, to be predominantly a striking fight, that seems like an insanely large number to me. So, yeah, I lean the Petrosian KO side, and I lean Petrosian pretty strongly. Moving on, though. Co-main event of the evening. This is just disgusting. Arman Sarukian, Joaquim Silva. I know you have something here. What are your thoughts?
One of us has to have something on this dirty fight, John. This fight has to happen. But yeah, this fight closes out the under 2.5 I have with the Torres fight. I have the under 2.5 rounds here. I think Sarukian takes care of business. I think he doesn't even need to grapple here. I think he keeps his standing. I think he knocks him out. Silva doesn't have much of a chin at all. He's guys going to go for it. Doesn't have much cardio either. I think this is Sarukian all day. The cardio edge is massive.
Yeah, I think it's the rare case where minus 1,000 is probably value. I'd be pretty surprised. I feel like Silva ass pulling a decision is probably like 5-6% somewhere, or ass pulling a finish, I should say. I think his chances of winning a decision are almost non-existent, honestly. I'm obviously not betting Sarukian minus 1,000, and I'm a bit less passionate on violence than you are, just because, Arman has taken some fragile-ish guys deep into fights previous to this. But, yeah, I don't have a lot to add. Arman's one of the best 3 fighters at lightweight in the world. Joaquim Silva is not a top 30 lightweight. He's going to absolutely maul him. So
it's a shame nobody wants to sign a line with Arman. I get why, but it's a shame.
He was saying he wants Benny if he wins this fight. Like, that would be awesome. I would sign up for that. Like that, Arman Benny would be great.
Or Charles.
I would sign up for that too. But I was looking at the lightweight rankings, and dude, who else are they going to do against Islam other than Charles? It's ugly, man. It really is. You're going to do the DP Gagey winner? Does anybody want to see that?
No,
like that's
and that's the thing. Neither of those two are going to sign to fight Arman because they probably declined in the past already. So
of course not. You don't want to be making Justin Gaethje against Arman Sarukian. Like that's ridiculous. I'll tell you right now. Top 5 for lightweight: Islam, obviously champion; Charles, Dustin, Justin, Benil, who's obviously out of the picture; Chandler, who can't win a fight but somehow is holding down a number 5 lightweight ranking; and then you have Fiziev at number 6, who's coming off a loss. Gamrot at number 7, coming off a very, very close fight with Jalen Turner, and then Arman at number 8. Like, I feel like
you have to run Benny. I feel like Benny, the only one that lodges, not to cut you off there. I feel like Benny's the only one that makes sense because if we're running Charles and Islam, Dustin and Justin already fighting each other. Chandler's likely fighting Connor. Maybe we don't know what's going on there. Fiziev, I guess, would be fun. I think a Gamrot rematch doesn't make a ton of sense this early. I would like to see that fight again.
Gonna win, man. Like
that's true.
I would sign up for like Fiziev Arman as like winner gets next shot, or like Fiziev Benny and winner gets next shot after Charles. But
I don't want to see Benny die. Please no.
I don't really want to either, but I also want to see Benny Islam, so I wouldn't mind seeing him take his crack. But anyway, moving on. Main event, we got Meathead Marvin Vettori taking on Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. Fights a pick 'em. Minus 110 aside here. Honestly, early numbers, I was thinking of playing Jared. Like, that was like my pretty strong lean early on. And like, the more I think about it, the more I'm with Pepe. I don't want Charles Islam either, frankly. But I don't.
That's another. That's what's tough with the lightweight division. It's so stacked that it's also like some of the fight, like the matchmaking. It's like we can't have some of those fights in there. Like we talked about the Justin and the Armans.
Yeah, agreed. But anyway, Marvin Vettori, I was leaning to the Jared side, and I don't know. Then the line came back to pick, and I was like, I'm not going to bet this. But even thinking about it more, I'm still not going to bet it. I feel like, I don't know. I get the idea on the Jared side, leg kicks, more power than Vettori, obviously. Kept up with Strickland on volume in his last fight. But I don't know, man. Like, the more I think about it, it's like, yes, he sort of kept up in volume on Strickland. He did get outlanded in that fight. And he surely hits harder and has like good leg kicks. But like we saw Vittori tank leg kicks from Adesanya with zero issue, pretty much that entire fight. Obviously, Jared's the harder hitter, but like Marvin is a much more aggressive fighter in terms of how he pushes it. And this is kind of like the counterpoint to what I was talking about with Salikov earlier. Marvin is like the rare exception of the guy who doesn't really give a fuck about how dangerous you are. He tends to go forward and push it. Like, we saw that with the Costa fight. He bit the mouthpiece and forced it the entire fight. And so, like, I think he's going to push this fight at a pace that could probably make Jared pretty uncomfortable here. I think there is a decent amount of grappling equity, or I should say wrestling equity. I doubt he can hold Jared down, but like I could see him landing 3 or 4 takedowns and really disrupting Jared's rhythm throughout this fight, which I think could cause him major issues as the fight goes on. And so the more I think about it, the more I'm slowly starting to lean to the Marvin side, because if you take away Jared's like Jared against most fighters, you put like a reasonably high chance to finish the fight. Against Marvin, I'd probably make it like 20% maybe. And so that takes away a lot of, Jared's path to victory. I think he can KO Marvin. I just don't think it happens at a high clip. I think Marvin's minute winning ability and his gas tank are both better than Jared's. I don't know. Plus Jared's 38 years old. Marvin's 29. The only 2 guys to beat Marvin since 2017 are Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. I don't know. I'm kind of rooting for Jared. Like, I would like to see Jared make one last run and get one last shot. But I think the more I think about it, I think it's a very close fight, I should say. I shouldn't say I think it's a great fight for Marvin. I don't. I think it's a very close fight. I think the line's about right, but I'm leaning to the Marvin side. What are your thoughts, Lags?
So, bit interesting. I'm actually a little bit on like the other side. I'll get into it a bit, but looking into the fight before even taping anything, I'm all right. Marvin should be good spot here. I think he's got the grappling edge, cardio edge, probably volume edge as well on the feet. And then after I'm done taping it and watching like the Leeds fight where I had big money on him there, it's like that fight was just like not a great look, really. I mean, I thought he was going to honestly handle him striking, and I thought he was going to be able to mix in some takedowns, no problem. But he had no interest to try to do so. And so honestly, I get more so of the Jared arguments of the power and the volume keeping it close over 5 rounds here. And not that I don't think there's like kind of like you said, I don't think that there's a ton of grappling upside for Marvin, but could he mix in a few takedowns here or there? Yeah. But yeah, to ultimately your point, I think this fight is close. So
what's interesting to me though too? You mentioned the Leeds fight, and I bet him too. Yeah. And obviously making that bet feels like shit. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, we're probably putting too much into that Leeds fight. He's not the first fighter to have a bad performance like that. We see that happen all the time. Like, and I feel like if the Leeds fight doesn't happen and he goes from the Whittaker fight to this, he's probably getting priced at like minus 185. So yeah, kind of like what Pepe just said. I do think there's a lot of recency bias. People are remembering literally the worst look for Marvin maybe his UFC career, honestly. So,
but see,
I feel like, yeah.
Go ahead. No,
I was gonna say, I feel like Marvin coming back more to like what his average expectation for a given fight is pretty likely here, and I feel like with Jared at 38, the chances of Jared like not even falling off a cliff necessarily, but declining enough that Marvin fighting like Marvin normally does, and Jared even being slightly declined could look like pretty heavy Marvin. Like, people forget it, but 2 fights ago, before Brunson gassed out, Brunson was fucking up Jared. He won the first round. He dropped him. He was winning minutes even on the feet in that fight. Like, everybody forgets this, but that was happening. And I think Vittori can do a lot of what Brunson did. He's not as good a wrestler, but he's a much better striker. Yeah, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, you're good. I was going to let you finish there. But all I was going to say was like, I get like that was Marvin's like worst day really, but like at the same time, I think the Leeds is a horrible striker. Like the dude's got power, but like technically wise, he's horrible. And he was just coming forward, landing shots on Marvin really whenever he wanted to, and Marvin didn't look to grapple really. So I don't know. It was a tough look really.
It was a tough look, but that's like kind of more my point. It's like if you're trying to find an edge, are you finding it on Jared Cannonier off arguably his best career performance against Sean Strickland over a 5-round fight that went to split? Or are you finding it on Marvin Vettori on the other side of that off arguably his worst career performance, but still only being 29 years old and being, I would say, reasonably likely to return to form, Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a cool main event. It's one of the better main events they've put together recently. So.
What I'm still curious at the it's been getting hit a lot. I feel like the over 4.5 at a little bit earlier numbers was valued just because I feel like mostly
What's the price right
you're
now?
fading a Jared finish minus 190 to the over.
Oh, geez, really?
Yeah, it's been getting smoked.
Fucking heavy.
Yeah.
That seems heavy, honestly. For I know I said this before Whitaker Vittori, and then seemed like a complete fucking mook when it went.
I said Whitaker decision, yeah.
And I was like, how can decision be minus 300? But Jared is a fucking serious hitter. Plus, he's 38. I don't know. I feel like that's extreme, but I don't want
Marvin KO 13-1.
I don't really want to fuck around with that. I'd rather, honestly, I think I'd rather just watch and live bet it, and just see what, because if Marvin shows up and he's putting it on Jared early, I'd rather take Marvin minus 200 post around knowing he's in normal form, because if he is, Marvin's not going to slow down, he'll snowball you, or even take Jared after a round if it's a competitive. I don't know, or do nothing. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited to see the fight. Yeah, we'll see what happens. It's a good main event. It's a really good card. Yeah, we'll be back next week, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to do a Bellator stream this week. I haven't decided if it'll be tomorrow afternoon or Friday morning. Probably depends on how much I have to ferry my wife back and forth to the hospital. So, but I will be doing that stream eventually. Maybe PFL if I can get to all the fights there. But yeah, I have some strong Bellator opinions this week too. But yeah, that'll do it, guys. Drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Please get us to 1,000 fucking subscribers here. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, help out the algorithm, share it everywhere. We really want to get there. We're trying to juice the numbers here, but we're going to keep doing it even if you don't get us there. So, because that's the kind of people.
1,000 subs. We're trying to get there. John, new kid. New kid here. Come on. Got to get the
We're trying to make that $6 a month in ad revenue. Okay. That is what we're trying to do here.
But all serious note, John, congrats on the new kid.
Thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it. So very surprising. It was 6 weeks early. Nice. Not the weekend or the week I'd been expecting, but here we are.
How's the wife doing?
We clean up. She's good. She actually came home from the hospital today. So that is
Any
good.
cravings, anything there now?
No, her craving is sleep. Yeah. She's been in bed since 2 p.m. So I
figured.
But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out. We really appreciate it. I'll let everybody know when I'm dropping the Belly Show. We'll be back next week, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Great fucking card next week. It's Jillian Robertson season. I know my guy Pepe in the chat knows what I'm talking about here. The people are going to see it. I'm excited. Yeah, we'll catch you guys next week. Good luck on your bets this weekend. Peace.